Hello, everyone. At the EMI Conference 2021, the Johnson Emerging Markets Institute is collaborating with the Johnson Africa Business Society to present the Africa Tech and Innovation Panel. This initiative, made possible by the Johnson Africa Business Society President, Ivy Ochieng, will focus on the growth and trends of the tech industry across the African continent, the challenges and barriers facing homegrown and international tech companies, and recommended policies to overcome these obstacles in order to develop Africa's tech innovation hubs. We look forward to having you join us for this important and interesting discussion, and also look forward to further collaborations between these two groups. So welcome back from the coffee break. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for being here today. So the next thing on the agenda is the Africa Tech Panel. Today's panel is going to be a discussion on technology and innovations across the continent of Africa. The topics to be discussed include the venture capital ecosystem financing entrepreneurship and technology, agritech and fintech industries, opportunities in AI and machine learning, as well as the tech hubs across Africa and the associated skill acquisition and talent development opportunities. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Ivy Ochieng, who is our moderator and the president of the Johnson Africa Business Society.
Thank you, Chibuzo. It's my first time at Cornell Tech, which I think is fitting for the theme of this panel. But I just wanted to introduce our distinguished panelists, starting with Múyìwá Mátùlúkò. I hope he's on. But he's dialing in from Nigeria. Hi, can you see us? Oh, he's frozen. But Múyìwá is dialing in from Nigeria, and he's the chief editor at Techpoint, which is a publication in Nigeria. And then next we have Kutlwano, Mzwinila. Welcome, you can join us on stage. And so he's a Cornell grad, former EMI fellow, happy to have him back. He's currently a manager at Google. And then finally, we have Marcus Troyjo, he's president of the New Development Bank, and he has a video for us at the end. So, can you hear us, Múyìwá? I hope you can connect. Okay, I'll just start with Kutlwano.
No worries.
So, thank you for joining us in person. You've worked in Africa in tech. You're now in New York City working at Google, which has recently invested $1 billion for Africa over the next 5 years. I would love to know, what's this interest in foreign tech companies in the continent? What opportunities do they see? And also, how do they plan to mitigate the various risks that we've all heard about?
Okay. So first of all, thank you for having me. Really do appreciate it. I think what we should basically understand is within the Africa space, particularly the tech space, is a lot of foreign companies are investing heavily within the continent because they see the potential that's present within the African continent. And there has been a massive boom in realizing this particular potential and noticing that, for instance, I think the African continent is one of the first continents where people skipped going from the internet, from the computers, going straight from the internet to like their phones. So the adoption and the prevalence of technology within Africa has been a sure sign that it is the place to invest. And it's also got one of the largest, youngest populations on the planet. And we see a whole bunch of potential to really tap into those particular resources from a technology perspective. Not only Google, but we also see that there's a whole bunch of investment within other large global companies investing within the tech space within Africa. Predominantly, as you mentioned before, Google is investing $1 billion over 5 years, and their focus is, to look at how to enable access to everyone within the entire continent. So not necessarily looking at different groups, but also to assist NGOs to, really improve the lives of everyone else, as well as the entrepreneurial spirit, tap into the entrepreneurial spirit that is present within Africa.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I think it leads to Múyìwá's question. I think I see him. He's working now. Great.
Hi. So sorry about that.
No worries, no worries.
Technical
We're talking
issues.
about tech. It only makes sense that we have some issues. But I would like to understand the current state of tech in Africa. You know, there's a lot of talk about fintech, the startup culture. Can you give us more insight on how you're covering the continent and what's happening over there?
So it's a very exciting time for tech in Africa. You could say it has come of age over the past decade. So one of the most visible signs of how exciting the times are is venture capital, the amount of investment that is coming in, into African startups. And for comparison, in 2011, just 10 years ago, it was a big deal when a startup raised, an African startup raised $3 million as a Series A, which means it's later in the stage of development. But today, just earlier this week, we had a startup called PayVipo, which is a fintech startup, helps small businesses get loans, raised $3 million as a seed investment. So it's just testing out an idea, and you already have $3 million. So that's also in Egypt, for example, a couple of months ago, a startup named Flexstock, which is an e-commerce startup, raised $3.25 million as its pre-seed round. So it's a big deal now. It shows a lot of investor confidence in the innovative spirit and what is going on in Africa. And it's so exciting. And just this year alone, we had 5 African startups achieve unicorn status, which is, they are now worth above $1 billion. So we have 6 African startups in total that are now identified as unicorns worth over $1 billion. And 5 of them achieved that status just this year, in 2021. So it's an exciting time, a lot of investment coming in. And also locally, of course, local investors are also participating, because that used to be a trend even 3 or 5 years ago, that most of the investment in startups, VC in startups, came from foreign sources. But these days we have a lot of local investors very active. The ticket size may not be as large as the foreign sources, but they are more active in terms of number of deals and whatnot. The startup culture itself, very interesting. We're at a stage where many of the early pioneers of the tech startup space in Africa are now empowered. They build startups. Some of them have been acquired, like Paystack, for example, is a fintech startup. They help ease up payments, online payments across Africa. And they were acquired by Stripe in the US for $200 million in 2020. And lots of local investors that participated when they launched in 2015 made as much as 80 times what they put in. And now they have enough funds to invest more in startups. And then even the founders of startups like this Space Startups are also investing in upcoming startups. So we have this startup culture where even African founders are also supporting upcoming startups. And so the startup culture is a lot of exciting things going on. Of course, there's also tech talent. Tech talent is something that Africa is a major export for Africa right now. We are aware of, for example, like Andela, that engages a lot of African talent, tech talent, expose them to the world. Or even locally, we have the likes of Decagon, Kebeya in Ethiopia, Talent Square in Nigeria. They are also doing their own parts to accelerate tech talent. And yeah, so basically that's it. You also asked about how we are managing to cover that. I mean, we're doing our best. I will not fail to recognize, because it's so exciting. There's so much going on. Our markets are so different. So, for example, we have the MENA region, which is where Egypt falls under. And that region is a different market from, say, West Africa, where I'm from. Like, totally different market. And a lot is going on there. So there's only so much that Techpoint itself can cover. We do our best to cover everything. But I will not fail to recognize that there are other media platforms that are also doing their best. The Wheat Trackers in Kenya, Menabites in Egypt, Techapal along Techpoint in Nigeria. So there's a lot going on, and I wouldn't bet against Africa right now. There's so much going on, and you shouldn't bet against Africa either. It's so exciting time. Exciting time.
Very nice. I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that, Kutlwano.
No, I think he really just hit the nail on the hammer there. Just wanted to add on as well is we see within the VC space is even large companies are also trying to sponsor VC funds and VC firms within the Africa space. Part of the $1 billion fund that Google is offering to Africa is also to invest within startups and to invest within that entrepreneurial spirit and tap into that potential. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I just want to remind everyone to please submit your questions over the Slido, and then we'll be taking questions at the end. But then we've spoken about the private sector investments in the continent. And I was wondering if Múyìwá, you can talk about the importance of institutional investment. For example, Nigeria just announced the startup bill. So I'm wondering what other legislations, policies are necessary to actually influence this tech boom?
Yeah, so the startup bill came about as a result of, would I say, for want of a better term, fragmentation in policies and regulation in the tech space in Nigeria, and is modeled kind of after the Tunisian startup bill. So Tunisia was one of the first African nations to set up a startup act. It's now an act that recognizes startups and provides some incentives for entrepreneurs to pursue innovative endeavors, in terms of support for capital, in terms of policy, infrastructure support. So that's what the startup bill is hoping to achieve, and it has been submitted to the Senate. Generally the outlook, the perspective is generally there's a lot of positive expectations around that. Amidst all the negatives, there's a generally positive expectation. Also, the governments, of course, we've seen the tech giants like Facebook and Google, also trying to play a role in that because they want to tap into this. Everybody's looking out into the next billion users, for example. So Facebook, for example, launched the 2 Africa projects that connects a fiber cable that connects Africa, Europe, and Asia. Google has also made strides in that. Also, we also have local players like Main1 that is doing very well in West Africa to connect West Africa. And then we have government policies, governments also providing capital. We have, for example, in Nigeria, they have the broadband policy that the aim is to achieve as much as 30% broadband penetration by 2025. So all of these things are happening, to, should I say, accelerate the markets and make things happen. And they are very important, without a doubt. Very important that all of this happens. Of course, also there's in Nigeria, there's also the Finance Act that kind of sort of recognizes startups and give them some kind of tax reliefs of sorts. So at a certain threshold of revenue that they generate, they don't have to pay capital income tax and whatnot. So the governments, institutions, whatnot are recognizing the space. There's still a lot to be done, so much to be done, but there's a lot of progress being made. I don't know if that addresses your question. Yeah.
No, it's absolutely right. I think we've seen a lot of private sector investments, right? But governments also have to step up, which sort of leads to the next question, which is about personal investment. So Kutlwano, I would love to hear about what have you invested in terms of skill developments just to get you ready for the industry? Because we have a lot of current students in the audience, and I'm sure they want to know how did you get where you are?
I think it's worth mentioning, and this is going to be a bit of a selfish plug here, is Cornell really did help me allow me to really get that exposure and also just cement not only my interest within technology, but also to merge my interest in technology and seeing from the business perspective how the two can actually combine. And in particular, for instance, the Emerging Markets Institute, the EMI, that also gave me a very different global perspective in terms of how other emerging markets not only adopted technology, but also utilized the benefits and the opportunities that technology brings about. And I feel as if we're really at the cusp of really understanding and really, seeing the Africa continent adopt technology and see the benefits of that, such as, for instance, within the Asian markets, they adopted technology, and we're seeing exactly how those Asian markets responded positively to that adoption. So it's a really exciting time, not only to attend Cornell, but also to be part of the EMI, and also to, look from the private sector and see exactly how that can actually impact the African continent, our own personal development, and then utilizing all these particular opportunities to actually see some positive lights. So, yeah.
Couldn't agree more. being an EMI fellow has been influential in my career.
Yeah.
So we have a question from the audience. I don't know if you can see it, but Sergio Costa from Brazil is wondering, how fast is the telecom infrastructure evolving in African countries in order to support local startups and their benefit from 5G and enabling other tech? And I think Google, the 1 billion that you mentioned, goes towards fiber optics and stuff like that.
Yeah. So part of that investment, and as I mentioned before, is to enable access to everyone, which obviously looks at the infrastructure and obviously upgrading the different internet lines and internet cables that are within the African market as well. So that in itself, once you build the infrastructure, then you're able to allow different partners to be able to leverage that particular technology and access that particular technology. So from the telco industry, when I was in the telco industry back in Africa, there was a lot of innovative stuff happening there to solve real unique solutions that were only being faced within the African market. One particular example is not a lot of individuals within the African continent have access to traditional financial systems. The telco market really did capitalize on this particular instance and then figured out, using technology and using the innovative technology, how to actually provide individuals with bank accounts via their non-smartphones, so using like normal old school telephones and giving access to financial markets to individuals who didn't really have those means prior. So that's just one particular case and example of how technology and innovation and the telco industry managed to actually give people access to the financial markets.
Really great. Múyìwá, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, telecom infrastructure developing very fast. More of it is via the private sector, but then the government is also doing its part, providing policy. I know, for example, that South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya tested 5G connectivity, but not yet at commercial levels. But we can see that coming up in the next 5 years. But so far, the focus has been on 4G connectivity, broadband connectivity. Depending on who you ask, for example, Nigeria is almost at 30% broadband penetration, between 20 to 30% broadband penetration. So there's a lot of stride, a lot of progress so far. There's so much to be done.
Great. Next question. This one is anonymous. What emerging industry trend do you see gaining momentum in Africa? This is a good one.
Oh, that's a very good one.
You want to go first?
I will go first. Oof. I think the one sector that we need to keep an eye on, especially within Africa space, is the self-sustaining venture model. One of the things that you mentioned earlier is how are companies, especially global companies or institutional finances, how are they viewing the potential within Africa, and how are they trying to get away from the previous misconceptions of investing within Africa. And I think the one thing that we're going to start seeing soon is that the self-sustaining model within Africa, so African firms or African VC firms actually investing within African companies, and then seeing that self-sustaining model actually start to develop, which will then also give confidence to global investors. So I think we're going to start seeing from a private institutional perspective that self-sustaining model, but at the same time we're going to start seeing more policies geared towards adoption of entrepreneurship in terms of startup capital. So as you mentioned before, Nigeria has some legislation that's also out to foster startups as well. South Africa is also trying to look at some legislation that's also going to try create better environments for entrepreneurs as well. So we're starting to see a cascading effect across the African continent where there'll be a VC self-sustaining model, as well as more confidence within global markets to invest within the continent.
And who I see actually investing in that is the diaspora, going back and actually starting companies, starting VCs to invest in African firms.
Bringing their networks that they've created, and also all the wealth of knowledge that they have that they've gotten from other economies, and bringing it back into the African continent.
Múyìwá, anything to add on?
Yeah, I quite agree with that. I just remembered a startup that just launched recently called Get Equity. So it allows Africans in diaspora and local invest in startups and whatnot. So I agree with that. But I'll go with an obvious answer also. It seems like an obvious answer. It seems like it might die soon, but it's still the trend, fintech. So one major area is still fintech, cross-border payments. So I see a lot of startups trying to use the blockchain to solve problems, with cross-border payments, DAOs and whatnot. There's a lot of trend around that area. I also see agritech. That's another rising trend. It started with crowdfunding. So the idea was to help farmers, help farmers control demand and supply and whatnot. But then the trend now is going towards, helping them to build capacity and whatnot, because food security is still a major issue in Africa. So those are some areas. And one other area is tech talent acceleration. That's a very huge area. That's one major export that is still very valid for Africa. So we're seeing a lot of startups playing around that area. Of course, there's still AI research. I mean, Google has an AI research center in Accra, Ghana, that is still in operation. So those are some areas you look at. You also look at health. I see exciting startups like 54Gene that is trying to map the African genome. They're doing very exciting things in health and using AI and machine learning. Very interesting things. So there's so much going on. I can't really pick just one trend.
You mentioned fintech. So the next question is from Evan Buchanan, who I believe is in the room. In light of Nigeria's launching the e-Naira, how do you view digital currency in Africa and its future?
Digital currency, from what I see, the way I see it, for right now, we are at the stage where many people see digital currencies as an opportunity to store value, because there's not much confidence in local currencies. But yes, we're also starting to see other uses of digital currencies, the uses that we're used to seeing in Europe, whether it's in terms of cross-border payments and whatnot. But I don't really have a strong opinion about that at the moment. I really do not have a strong opinion about that. But definitely there's so much going on. Cross-border payments is definitely one area that we're going to see more use of digital currency across Africa. Because sending money across Africa is still very difficult.
Yeah, if I can add on to that is, so the underlying technology behind, for instance, digital currencies is the blockchain, which essentially can also be used across different industries as well, so within agritech as well. So there is a definite potential for better fostering of blockchain and digital currencies across different countries within Africa. But what we need to also focus on is making sure that the infrastructure is there, the policy is there, as well as the training and acquisition of the particular talent within Africa is there as well. Then we can start seeing more prevalence of these different technologies and their adoption into different countries.
Great. So the next question is, what can other regions learn from Africa? And this is specifically in terms of tech and innovation development.
What I would like to say is, what really is resounding within Africa is the willingness and entrepreneurial spirit to tackle the unique challenges. We see case by case of African companies utilizing technology to really tackle problems at a massive scale that are very unique to Africa. So I think that's a real good lesson in terms of resilience, as well as a good lesson of innovation. Innovation for unique challenges and unique problems. And I think also something that also should be mentioned is within Africa, the entrepreneurial drive is something that I must say is something that should persuade global companies and global investors to actually look back into Africa and actually say, now's the opportunity, now's the chance, and let's really invest in the next big continent that's going to blow up.
I completely agree. There's so much opportunity there. And
Yeah.
I feel like the youth are just motivated to be part of that change.
Yeah.
That new innovations that are coming up. Múyìwá, anything to add?
Nothing to add. He summarized it perfectly. I was going to say something along that line.
Okay. Anyone have any final questions before we go to the video from Marcos Troyjo? Okay. Andrew, you want to play the video for us? Awesome. In the meantime, thank you, Múyìwá. Thank you, Kutlwano. It was a pleasure having both of you on the panel.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Hello, I wanted to say thank you for this opportunity to Dean Andrew Caroli and to my friend Professor Lourdes Casanova to be joining again this Emerging Markets Institute annual conference that has already become a tradition. I think it's one of the most visible and remarkable opportunities to discussing emerging markets, emerging economies, and I am very glad to once again be able to join as president of the new development bank. And in the discussion on global governance and new institutions, as you know, the new development bank was set up by the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa 6 years ago. And it's truly extraordinary to realize that about that time, the institution only existed on paper, it only existed as a dream. And now it's a fully functional development bank with 80 projects in infrastructure and sustainable development, which are the core areas of our focus. So we're talking about water, sanitation, transport, digital technology, digital infrastructure, smart cities, urban mobility in 4 continents. And we have already accumulated a portfolio of project approvals of about $30 billion. That is truly making a difference, and I think when you think of the examples that we can give for that infrastructure resources that we were able to mobilize, it's clear how much a new institution can do in terms of providing not only for global governance, but for answering to some of the most immediate needs of our member countries that reside in infrastructure and projects in sustainability. For example, if you were to set in a straight line all of the roads that the new development bank is building or being able to upgrade, that line would stretch across the entire diameter of Project Earth. Some of the CO2 emissions that via our sustainability projects we're able to stop from being launched into the atmosphere, that's the equivalent to planting 215 million trees. The urban rail that we're financing, if we were to compare to an already installed underground system, that would be the same as laying again the tracks of the entire metro system of a city like Paris. And this is particularly important because it's been said again and again that if you compare on the one hand the needs for infrastructure in the emerging world and the amount of resources that are put together by multilateral development institutions, that is only catering to about 4 or 5% of the entire set of needs. So more institutions that are able to put together resources, ideas, projects for infrastructure financing, for sustainable development, that is a major contribution to improving not only the performance of emerging economies in their objectives of development, but also to providing for more tools that enhance global governance as well. There are many challenges going forward. Some of the challenges relate to the very evolution of infrastructure. There is a kind of, as I like to say, metamorphosis of both the concept of sustainable development and of infrastructure itself. In the past, whenever we talked about infrastructure, we talked about physical infrastructure, so the building, the equipment. And today, this has to be merged with a new set of technologies that are made available to bring the solutions in infrastructure to the 21st century. We can no longer think of a hospital only in terms of the building itself or the gear that's going to go inside, but whether that health unit is connected to other health units so that a kind of early warning system is in place so as to avoid the spread or the expansion of an upcoming pandemic. If you're talking about a school, you're not only talking about the building of that educational unit, but how connected also that educational unit is to some kind of mobile devices that will allow children to resort to some sort of distance learning in case in-person classes are not happening. If you're talking about rail and you're talking about cargo, also smart infrastructure that is able to travel long distances without creating any kind of operational problems. And of course, this metamorphosis of infrastructure is adding more and more ESG considerations, because sustainable development is about the environment, but it's also about the human element, the social aspect, how we have to retrain and reskill people so that they're able to perform infrastructure-related functions in a 21st century sense of the concept, in the way that the economy 4.0 is going to demand a certain level of talent. To conclude, I wanted to say that global governance is also added by the new development bank in the sense that we have started a process of membership expansion. We were given the green light by our shareholders, and after a successful round of negotiations, we have announced 2 months ago our new members. So Bangladesh, one of the fastest growing economies in the world, the United Arab Emirates has also joined us as a full member. The UAE, which has become one of the most innovative marketplaces around the world, very interesting trajectory in terms of diversification of its economy towards value addition. Uruguay, a country that has a lot of experience in multilateral economic organizations. And that process is not going to stop. It's going to go on gradually, balancing in regional terms, so that the governance and consensus building platform that we have also creates positive effects for the international system. I'm very optimistic about it, that we are truly making the new development bank new every day. And going forward, I'm sure that it's in conferences like this one put together by Cornell that we're able to gather new ideas, share with you our experiences, and therefore improve global governance, especially from an emerging economies perspective. Thank you very much.